Visit Avery.com, Avary, for the most up-to-date news and information on Team Avery.
Avery, 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 Avery,
This is the Gala Show. I'm your reporter on the beat, Gala Avery. On this episode, you may know my guest as a critic whose written essays have been featured in publications such as Sight and Sound, The Guardian, Variety, and the Japanese Times. From his scholarly books, The Midnight Eye Guide to New Japanese Films, Behind the Pink Curtain, and The Historical Dictionary of Japanese Films, or as one of the directors of the award-winning documentary The Creeping Garden. But here on The Gala Show, I simply know him as Jasper Sharp. Hey, Jasper.
Hi, Gala. Thanks for inviting me.
You're very, very welcome. I'm so happy to have you on the show. So before we bring up the topic for today, I have a question for you. What was it about Japan that specifically drew you to its cinema? I've talked to a few people about like when they really love a country's cinema. Like I really love Mexican cinema personally, but I thought about it when I started reading that you're really into Japan. I was like, well, what is it about Japanese cinema that drew you?
Oh, that's a long question. I came to it quite late, actually. I mean, I grew up a horror fan and used to watch everything on TV, watch everything that was on VHS, whatever, in the 80s. And then I think I got out of horror in the 90s. And then I had this big travel bug. And so did a lot of hitchhiking around Europe and then realised that the best way to learn about a country is to watch its cinema. So I really got into foreign language cinema, moved away from just genre cinema and used to watch a lot of art house stuff. And I'd always had this dream of going to Japan. And I think I just basically just watched a couple of Japanese films, you know, to get into that sort of vibe. And I was always struck by how odd they were. I mean, how different they were from sort of
for sure
Hollywood
for
cinema.
sure.
And I think it's that sort of mixture of like aesthetics and narrative and about how the visuals really carry the story, and also just the sheer volume of it. I mean, I watched a lot of stuff in the mid-90s. Kitano, for example, Takeshi Kitano's stuff like Sonatine. You know, you have a gangster movie where you basically got, you know, a bunch of gangsters sat on a beach waiting for something to happen and playing all these silly games, and it's like, hang on, this isn't a gangster movie. This is sort of like Waiting for Godard or something.
Yeah.
It's
so funny because like I took Japanese in college. I really loved Japan. I loved anime growing up. I love Japanese authors. I love manga. But I don't love Japanese movies necessarily. Like, it's not like my like passion and bread and butter. And I would think that I would love it because I love the culture and I'm so culturally informed on it. But it just never clicked with me. So I always find it just fascinating that some cultures click specifically their cinema with people.
I know. I don't know. I feel it just sort of really, appeals to me. I just get it. I mean, the one thing about Japanese cinema is worth remembering is that they began making films in 1896. I mean, they've been there right from the very beginning. And you're looking at like, there's just so much of it. You've got 120 years of film history from a completely different global perspective, but there's just so many films. I mean, like, take a peek here, like 1960, they made 500 feature films.
Wow.
So
on that,
you know,
tiny little island.
Yeah, exactly. And so you think that, you know, we all know the sort of Godzilla films or like Ozu or Kurosawa or whatever, but just like there's so much else there. So whenever you feel like you're getting bored of Japanese cinema, you just go down and explore another sort of avenue and you'll find a whole load more that you just weren't aware about. It's always something to discover.
Wow, that's great advice. I'm going to take that. Now, as always, my guest gets to bring their topic to the mic. Jasper, what is your topic and why did you decide to choose it?
Well, I have two great passions in life, and one of them is Japanese cinema, and the other is mycology, mushrooms, fungus. And there's this intersect there, but also this particular film that is my topic today, which is Matango, Fungus of Terror, or also known as Attack of the Mushroom People, was what led me from Japanese cinema to my other passion, which is wandering around woods and looking for mushrooms. Before we get into the topic, it's time for a commercial break.
Back by popular demand, the Video Archives merch store is up and running. Get your favorite t-shirts, hats, notebooks, stickers, and more at videoarchivesmerch.com. You know me. I write all my notes in the Notes on Cinema notebook, the Gala edition, of course. Check out videoarchivesmerch.com to get yours today. Hey, thanks so much for being a loyal listener. If you want to keep up with me off mic, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Gala Avery.
This is Leo Skepi, and this is your official invitation to listen to my podcast, Aware and Aggravated. I discuss self-improvement beyond the surface level. I break things down psychologically, spiritually, and emotionally with some of the most unique and refreshing perspectives that I've ever found. And sharing them has changed so many people's lives already just from listening. I speak realistically with brutal honesty because that's what gives people the boost they need. A boost in confidence, energy, discipline, and overall acceptance and love for yourself. Everything is about to get better. So subscribe today. Aware and Aggravated.
Hi, I'm Chris Gethard, and I'm very excited to tell you about Beautiful Anonymous, a podcast where I talk to random people on the phone. I tweet out a phone number, thousands of people try to call. We talk to one of them, they stay anonymous, I can't hang up, that's all the rules. I never know what's going to happen. We get serious ones. I've talked with meth dealers on their way to prison. I've talked to people who survived mass shootings. Crazy funny ones. I talked to a guy with a goose laugh, somebody who dresses up as a pirate on the weekends. I never know what's going to happen. It's a great show. Subscribe today, Beautiful Anonymous.
Do you love Japanese horror and want to know more about how these movies crossed over to the West at the turn of the millennium? Check out The J-Horror Virus, a new documentary available on Shudder. Directed by Sarah Appleton and Jasper Sharp, The J-Horror Virus tells us the story of how a Japanese videotape changed the course of global horror history. The documentary features interviews with key figures in the genre, including Kiyoshi Kurosawa, Shinya Tsukamoto, Takashi Shimizu, Masayuki Ochiai, Mari Asato, Rie Inu, and Takako Fuji. The J-Horror Virus is available now on Shudder.
And we're back.
You heard it here. We are going to be talking about Matango, Attack of the Mushroom People, and also how it led to the love of foraging for mushrooms. So I have 30 minutes on the clock, and our time starts now. Okay, I've heard a lot about this Attack of the Mushroom People movie. Actually, it's the movie where, like, people become mushrooms, right? Like, that's what this is?
Yeah, basically the story...
In, like, layman's terms, yeah.
Yeah, the story is basically a ship sort of cruising through the Pacific, and there you've got some ultra wealthy sort of people on the ship. There's a model, an actor, and a writer, and then you've got like the deckhands below, the captain. So you've got the class structure written large in the voyagers on this boat. And then they get washed ashore on this remote island, which has been subjected to atomic bomb testing. So they get there, and it's just like washed ashore. They find a shipwreck there, and lots of green powder everywhere, all over the ship. Strange messages in the ship's log, and warnings not to eat the mushrooms, whatever they do.
Wow.
And of course, people do. And basically, what we have here is like the former crew of the shipwreck that got washed up on this island. Just basically transformed into giant mutant mushrooms.
Because Quentin actually brought this movie up. I forget, I don't know, because we covered Rodan on Video Archives, and maybe it was when we were talking about Rodan that he brought up the Attack of the Mushroom People. I can't remember if that was exactly it, but I remember I looked it up and I was like, this looks really cool.
It is really cool.
It is really cool. Okay,
it is really, and it's not just silly monster movie stuff. It is really dark and bleak and philosophical, and also just garishly sort of hallucinogenic at the same time.
So when did you first see it? Like,
pretty late in life. I mean, growing up in the UK, we didn't have all the sort of the Godzilla, the Ishiro Honda, Toho monster movies playing all the time. I think that was something in North America. These films all got sort of like dubbed and syndicated to TV, and so there's a massive big fan base for these sort of kaiju eiga, the monster movies here in America. But
they're for sure. I mean, when I was a kid, I grew up watching them. Like literally, Mothra is like
Mothra. I mean,
God, I was
Mothra is a
obsessed with
really,
Mothra.
really good companion piece
Is it?
to
Okay,
Matango.
great. Yeah, because I was obsessed with Mothra, and I think it's a Attack All Monsters or something. Like they had a video game version of it. Destroy All Monsters, and they had a video game version of it. So I used to play it on the GameCube with my brother. And in that movie, she has like the earrings on, and they grab her by the earrings and they pull them off because they're the mind control device. And that always scared me so bad as a little kid because I was like, oh my God, they might do that to me. But it's funny because I grew up watching those kaiju movies, and I have a really soft spot for some of them. Not as an adult, but as a kid, Mothra was like my thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people got into Japanese movies through these monster movies, whereas I got into the monster movies through being into Japanese cinema. So I sort of came through the other direction.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you had the two sides of Japanese film that got globally popular in the 1950s. You had basically the art house auteur-driven stuff of Yasujiro Ozu and Akira Kurosawa, Kenji Mizoguchi. But then Godzilla, of course, got syndicated to US TV and probably had a far bigger audience than those. But, you know, a lot of the and it's also the way that critics approached Japanese cinema. So you would have all the highbrow.
The academics. Very highbrow.
People going on about the Zen aesthetics of Ozu, but then there would be that sort of more sort of cultish sort of fan sort of appreciation of these monster movies. But I mean, they basically came from the same studio system, the same culture. So I don't think it's fair to pit one against the other. I mean,
I think you're right. And it's funny though, because you kind of captured it when I was saying earlier that like I didn't really connect to Japanese cinema. I think I don't connect to like the highbrow auteur Japanese cinema, which is basically told to people of my generation, like, this is what you should like. Like I remember my dad first showed me Rashomon. He's like, you need to know what Rashomon is because it's a Rashomon story. It's like a thing that has been copied over and over and over again. I do like that movie, but it's just like, there's some things where it's like, I just want to have fun. And this Attack of the Mushroom People sounds like it's a lot of fun.
Definitely a lot of fun. Yeah. I mean, I guess the first ever book on Japanese cinema was written by Donald Ritchie, and he was very much into that sort of auteur-driven, sort of great man, sort of prestige cinema sort of side of thing, and would always dismiss the sort of.
Wow, it's really then like who shepherded in, like they kind of curated what people saw of Japanese cinema then, and like what they were going to enjoy in Japanese cinema, I guess.
Yeah.
Like if they're telling you like this is what's good and this is what's bad, you might end up believing them when you don't have access to the internet like we do now, where I can kind of go and make my own opinions about stuff by just searching.
So when I first started writing about Japanese cinema, it was through this partnership with this Dutch friend of mine, Tom Mez, and we set up the website Midnight Eye in the late 90s. At that time, the basically critical to the standpoint was Japanese cinema is boring. Nothing has happened since. It's like maybe we had the new wave stuff such as Oshima's films or Shohei Imamura, but there was nothing really exciting happening nowadays when we were watching these films. And we had stuff like Kiyoshi Kurosawa with Cure. Just before the Ring films came out.
And this is like kind of around the time of, is this before Takashi Miike? This is before,
Yeah, I mean, with Midnight Eye, we were like one of the first, we were the first people basically to champion Takashi Miike. My co-writer, Tom, wrote the book on Takashi Miike,
really?
Agitator.
Wow.
I mean, he loved the stuff. And
so you guys are responsible for bringing in like the second wave of Japanese cinema that everyone is saying to watch now.
That's right. I think we were. And for me, it was all a case about there were no hierarchies. I mean, Behind the Pink Curtain, my book, I wrote about Roman porno and pink cinema, the sex films.
I was excited about this actually because I have a friend who like specifically only watches Pinku films. Yeah. And like it's a girl, which is I find very fascinating, but she really loves it and she really champions it as an actual art form, that it's not just like a porno. And so when I talk with her about it, I'm always like, really? Like this is...
Yeah, certainly when I wrote Behind the Pink Curtain, I was like really scared about the reception of as a critic, it's like, what are people going to think about this English guy writing about Japanese sex films?
Oh God, they could say anything. You never know.
Yeah, and it was great. I mean, I did lots of retrospectives with these films and programming them at the British Film Institute, for example, and various international festivals. And I was amazed that actually the main appreciation was there was a lot of female audiences that were like going, well, this is really great. I mean, there's more to this than just sex.
Yeah, I find that a lot of women are actually, when they watch a Pinku movie specifically, they feel empowered by it. I don't really know specifically why, because I don't watch a ton of like X-rated stuff in general. It's just like not my jam. But I find like when I talk to girls, who are the only ones that are ever talking to me about Pinku specifically, they feel really empowered by it. And I'm like, okay, well, we're good for you.
I remember this event where I did it in Bristol, a small town in England, and basically I did a series of like, you know, an all-nighter maybe of like, you know, half a dozen Pink films. And this guy came up to me with his girlfriend. They both bought my book, and he was going, thank you so much for putting this on. And it's like, my girlfriend here, she loved this, and you know, we found something we can watch together, because she does not want to watch like
Western
internet porn or whatever, you know, hardcore stuff.
Wow. And I think also, like, when we were talking a little bit before about like Japanese cinema, it's so culturally informed by kind of like the boundaries that are placed on it, like pornography boundaries. Like, they have strict kind of rules about what you can show and what you can't, right?
Yeah, you can't show pubic hair, and it's, I mean, you can now, but I mean,
now
back
you can,
in,
but
back in those days it was very strict. But I mean, I just think they went for the more sort of intellectual component about like really looking at male-female relationships,
the story behind it.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating. So when you saw this Attack of the Mushroom People movie, how long did it take before you started actually going and looking for mushrooms? I'm very interested in this. I'm like, actually, like, I'm really interested, because when you said your topic was mushrooms, I was like, does he mean like foraging for mushrooms? Does he mean like psychedelic mushrooms? Like, what kind of mushrooms is he talking about?
Well, one of the things that I came to Attack of the Mushroom People, Matango, quite late, in that I was at the time working in Amsterdam, not in a film capacity, and working in Yellow Pages, the telephone directory, in an IT capacity. And
Back when we had Yellow Pages.
Yeah, and that's where I suddenly, you know, all the video shops in Amsterdam, I just had the most amazing range of Japanese films, so I could really just go and explore and get whatever I wanted there. So it was in the Amsterdam context, I'll say no more, that I watched Matango. You know, I was quite early in my career as a writer at the time, and I look back and I wrote this review for Midnight Eye in Amsterdam, and I love reading back at it, because it just seems so fresh. It's not with all the, as a sort of naive young writer, it was just not all the baggage we attach where you have to put in the facts and the knowledge or anything. It was just like what it actually said to me, and I was just amazed at how it just gels with all these ideas like James Lovelock's Gaia theory, and about how this sort of man being part of the natural world, and
also like what fungus is, because it's not a plant, it's not an animal, it's its own being. It's like the whole connection of spores,
and of course the mushrooms are basically only just the fruiting bodies. They're not like plants at all. They're basically the structure of a fungus is basically the mycelium network of cells that you don't see at all.
And they talk to each other too. Like, they've done all this like research and stuff. It's just like how they say like trees now. I think the trees use the mycelium to talk to each other. This is like what I've heard, like through their root network.
Yeah, the mycorrhizal stuff. They have these symbiotic relationships with plants that sort of they transport the nutrients to the trees.
It's absolutely fascinating. And also, I'm vegetarian, and the only way that you can get vitamin D really as a vegetarian, besides the sun, is a mushroom. I think about that all the time. It's like the one source of vitamin D I can have, besides orange juice, I guess.
But of course, the question is, are mushrooms sentient at all?
Yeah, there's that question's always posed to me about just vegetables in general. Yeah. It's funny, but with mushrooms, I think about that a lot, actually, because I'm like, if I learned that mushrooms were sentient, I would have to stop eating them. And I do really enjoy eating mushrooms.
They are sentient in that there is a lot of research. It's actually such an under-researched field at the moment, but it's just coming back into fashion. But there's certainly all these things about different species sort of interact, so that they have wage warfare amongst you. If you get two rival species, one might pump out sort of toxic chemicals to repel the other one.
Wow, I didn't know that. I mean, I've heard my brother's really into this guy that like does ants on YouTube and like ant farms.
Okay.
And so he was watching, and he was telling me that like, okay, there's these aphids, and usually the ants will eat the aphids, but the ants have discovered they can farm the aphids. So they'll actually overpopulate them, and then they'll cull them, and then they'll leave a few because they know now it's like a food source. And so it's like, okay, here are these ants that are doing like really advanced like farming technique and like cattle with these aphids, and it's just blows my mind.
And there's a termite species as well that actually farms fungi. That
Really?
basically puts the spores in certain parts of its nest, and the fungus grows, and they eat the fungi there and then in the termite mound.
Wow. Wow, I'm just like, I'm in awe right now. So you started going out and actually foraging for them, or did you start researching?
I don't eat. I mean, if I find something tasty that I will go and gather a few and put them in the pan at home. But that's not my main interest. I mean, I just love the shapes of them, and actually, it's really similar to like film. I mean,
Really?
it's like
Okay, tell me about
in the
this.
way that when I grew up, I'd have all these big Bibles like Dennis Gifford's sort of the horror book, or like the Aurum Encyclopedia of Horror, when I just basically used to run through, and if I saw a film on the TV schedules, or when I moved to London showing at the Scala Cinema, I would basically want to go and watch that film and just tick it off the list. And I have a similar thing now when I know what species there are out there.
And you kind of know in the general area of where you are.
That's right. And so it's almost like a sort of, there's a sort of, if we bring it back to Japan as well, it's sort of like Pokemon as well. That sort of collecting the
You're
cards.
collecting
It's like,
them all.
I want to find every single species. I want to map what species are in different woodlands or in different grassland areas.
It's also really interesting because we're talking about a field that is understudied and like underdeveloped. And so when you're doing this kind of thing where you actually are tracking, I think you're helping and contributing to the science behind it.
Citizen science,
It's
yeah.
citizen science, and it's
And
really
actually,
fascinating.
I do. There's something I'll never get any acclaim for, but I just discovered a species
No
a couple
way.
of months ago, which
No
has never been
way.
found in the UK before.
It's like an entirely new species, or just new to the UK?
It's basically in North America, but this is the very first record.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Melitidiosporium hysterinum. So
Okay, so my question about this, so you're finding a mushroom that's typically in North America and it's in the UK, and it's like
Yeah.
this mycelium that is not found. Is it technically an invasive species?
it depends. I mean, this one is like basically looks like a lot of tiny black dots on sort of old dead bark. So probably the thing is no one has looked for it before, and if they have found it, they wouldn't know what it was. And I basically took a photo, looked at it under the microscope, looked at the spores, stuck it on Facebook going, does anyone know what this is? And this guy from America said, oh, can you send me a sample? And he's done DNA testing, and it's like, yes, this is a very rare species anywhere in the world, but this was the very first record in the UK.
Wow, congratulations.
I know,
This is amazing. Do you travel specifically, like vacation, to find mushrooms?
No.
No.
I basically, just have my local stamping grounds when I hang around.
Yeah. Have you found all the mushrooms that you think you're going to find in the local grounds?
No, definitely not.
Really?
No.
Do they hide places? Do they only come up at certain times?
They come up at certain times. They have different hosts. You have to have sharp eyes, and I think it's like, for me, it's quite an interesting adjunct to film criticism, where my day job now is film, so I spend all my time just sat there analysing what is on a screen. When you're out in the woods looking for mushrooms, all your senses are activated. You basically go into the woods and you're actively looking, your eyes are moving around, you're moving in 3 dimensions, and then finding these tiny species.
I also find it really fascinating, though, like when people in this, specifically in the film industry and in the film criticism, because you really have to look with like an eye for like you're picking apart something, and you're picking apart something you love. Like a lot of people get into this and it starts off as a hobby and you really enjoy doing it, and then when your hobby becomes your work, sometimes you lose a little bit of love for it, and you need to find a new hobby.
You definitely need to keep the two things running
That's
concurrently,
the
and see
thing.
how they feed off one another.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what Matango did for me. I mean, the one thing that when I moved to Japan shortly after watching Matango, and one of the other things I noticed was that in the UK supermarkets, all you get is the white button mushrooms.
Yeah.
You only have one species. In Japan, they just have this mushroom culture where you have like dozens of different types you could buy from the supermarkets, you get in restaurants. They also, at the time, you could legally get magic mushrooms in Japan, but they because it was considered part of their sort of Shintoist sort of
Culture,
being part of nature, sort of yeah.
Yeah, because I think about like what mushrooms I can get in the store. Okay, I can get the button mushrooms, I can get the portobello, I can get the enoki, I can get the bunapi, I can get the lion's mane now. I don't like lion's mane
Well,
mushrooms.
all of this has expanded. Like,
Yeah, it's
dramatically
definitely
in the past 20
expanded.
years.
But it's funny because like I love bunapi mushrooms. Like that's my all-time favorite. Like if I find a bunapi, I'm like, yes, that's mine. I want to eat it. At my parents' house, they have like 27 old-growth oak trees, and every year a mushroom like blossoms off of one of the oak trees. It's one of those like it's like yellow and it has like the steps to it.
Oh, the chicken of the
Is
woods.
it I think it's chicken of the woods, but there's a poisonous mushroom that looks just like chicken of the woods. Apparently, I think.
There's chicken of the woods. If it grows on yew trees, I think they might absorb some of the toxins. This is one of those subjects
It's one of
that's
those
always
subjects.
under
You don't want to
debate
eat
and-
it, so we just look
Yeah.
at it and we just appreciate it. But every now and then, my parents are like, "Should we cut it off and cook it?" And I'm like, "Well, you might need me to sit there and do like a toxicology thing, like call the bomb squad, basically."
Well, this is why I don't forage that much, was because, you know, there's very few species that are actually tasty. You know, there's quite a lot that are edible. There are very few that are deadly
That's
poisonous.
interesting.
But if you do get it wrong, you
You really get it
really
wrong.
get it wrong,
But it's
so-
funny you mentioned like they're edible, but they're not tasty. It's
yeah.
like
I mean, you look at your average bracket fungus on a tree. I mean, it's just like eating wood. I mean, it's
you're
and-
right, yeah, because you think about a mushroom like the stereotypical. Like I always think of like a toadstool mushroom or whatever, like the red and white one. So it's like my mom collected gnomes when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah, the
and so we
beautiful
have the beautiful
fly
like
agaric,
the
yeah.
big like red with the big puffy white, and like I think of Alice in Wonderland, and I think of Willy Wonka and like the chocolate factory, like when like I think he dips his finger, like Gene Wilder dips his fingers in like the whipped cream of the mushroom, and I think about that all the time. Like I want to eat the poisonous mushroom.
Well, this amazing scene at the end of Matango, of
Yeah.
course, when the love interest, you know, the girl goes missing and then the guy goes running out to find her, and she's in this big verdant glade, just holding this like mushroom, to like it's sort of like Adam and Eve, where she's nibbling on it, going, "Join us," you know. And
Yeah, and it's almost a phallic symbol also a little bit, the mushroom.
Yeah, there's-
so
yes,
you have a little
that's-
bit of that influence in there, especially with Japan where you can't show certain things, so you have to like mimic them in another way. I don't know. I dig it. So how do I see this movie? Like, is it just available? Like, is it...
It should be available, but it has never had a Blu-ray release. I mean,
I don't know. That's the thing. It's like, I feel like I've heard so much about this movie that I feel like I should have seen it. It's like one of those weird things. So like, I'm not sure, like, where is it? What's
I
going
think
on?
a certain company in the US has got the rights for it, but is sitting on it. That's what I've heard.
Why are they doing this to me?
The only thing I've done is that I organised a tour of it around the UK. I booked the 35mm print and ran it to a load of venues in the UK, and it was just, for me, it was just a way of seeing it, and seeing it on 35mm as well, because the colours are just beautiful.
What stock is it shot on? Do you know?
I think it would be Eastman colour, but then the Japanese had this amazing way with colour technology as well, where everything sort of the colours just are so much more vibrant.
God,
in
and I love
Japanese.
Eastman. If it's Eastman, I love Eastman. That's my favorite stock for sure to watch stuff on. Even if it's pink. I like the pink Eastman. I do. When I age, I want to grow old like pink Eastman. So that's so exciting though. It's like you watch something and it really like pivots you completely into another sphere. Like, did you ever think you were going to be foraging for mushrooms and like...
No, but I mean, this was one of the things that this film did for me was I started buying loads of books on mushrooms. You know, it's like I don't know anything about mushrooms, and it's something I should know about.
Was it literally like you watched the movie and you're like, I know nothing about mushrooms, I need to know more?
It wasn't immediately, but it was sort of one of these things that percolated.
Like it
over a
sat
couple
with
of
you and
years.
you're like, huh, wait a second. Like I'm
Yes.
thinking about this movie a lot and there's a lot of mushrooms in that and I don't really know much about like what that actually is.
That's right, and I got this book by a guy called Paul Stamets, Mycelium Running, who's a bit of the fungi guru in the States. And
He's
he
the
was
fun
talk-
guy.
He is the fun guy, yeah.
We had to say it. If we're talking about mushrooms, I had to do it. I had to, you guys.
But he had all these tips for cultivating mushrooms,
Mm-hmm.
and I tried doing this. I immediately thought, well, I'm gonna do this at home. I can grow my own oyster mushrooms, and this is what led to the Creeping Garden, was because I basically tried growing a load of mushrooms at home, and they got contaminated by a slime mold. And I was looking at this growth on this straw substrate I had, and it's like, what the hell is this? So scratching my head, and then a friend of mine who was actually a magazine editor who happened to have done a degree in mycology. So it was one of those weird,
How does that happen to do
weird
that?
coincidences. He was going, no, that's not a fungus, that's a slime mold. And I was, what is a slime mold?
Yeah, what is a slime mold?
A slime mold is not a fungus. It's like they're structurally very different.
So it's a mold.
It's a single-celled organism. So mushrooms are made of like hypha, which is like these sort of cell-like, sort of thread-like cells, which form a sort of big network. Slime molds are just basically a gooey sort of single-celled mass that crawls around with a sort of degree of, if not intelligence, agency. They can forage for food. They will creep over and form these networks that form cobwebs. And so this was my inquiry. It's like, what is a slime mold? And then I met my co-director on Creeping Garden, Tim Grabham, who'd actually made a documentary about Japan, and was also an animator. And so I was just one night in the pub saying, you know, what, have you got another project? And he was going, no, I haven't got anything at the moment. I said, how about this for a film? And we just sat there over a few beers talking about slime molds. And he was going, yes, I'm in.
That's amazing.
And so it happened. It's just, I don't know, most of the things in my life are never planned. I just sort of,
It just kind of
like a slime mold, sort of just seep towards it.
How did it get contaminated with slime mold? Like, where does that come from? That kind of creeps me out. I don't know about that.
I know, it was almost like I didn't find the subject, it found me.
It literally found you.
It wanted a film to be made about it.
It feels like the Blob. Like, the Blob came towards you and was like, make movie about me. Do it about me. It's kind of creepy. I don't know how I feel about that. So do you grow mushrooms now?
I don't know.
You're
I
like,
would
that
like to
slime
get,
mold
I
is
would like
done.
to get back to it, but yeah, I haven't. You need a lot of patience for that sort of thing.
Really? Are there certain times of year where you live where the mushrooms are just everywhere?
I mean, they always say that it's always fall, autumn, you know, where is the main fungi season. But, you know, things happen at different times of the year. So, and slime molds
precipitation.
are all around the year.
So do you actually hunt for slime mold also?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, they're always in the same places, damp, wet,
Are they like-
humid spot.
Like, do they help each other? Are they beneficial? Are they fighting each other? I'm obsessed with the fact that these mushrooms are like at war with each other. Like, mushroom colonies are fighting each other. It's like, it feels like Bug's Life, but like with mushrooms.
I think slime molds basically feed on bacteria and yeast, and they might some of them grow on mushrooms, but they might be eating the spores or just the other byproducts of decay. So
I've never heard about a slime mold. Now I'm freaking out. Like, I'm gonna start eating slime mold. Like, what's it? It's like gonna literally be the stuff. Like, the stuff is gonna come at me now.
if you watch Spinal Tap in the extras,
No way.
Davidson Hubbins has this quote about slime molds.
No
And
way.
He starts waxing on about, have you read about slime molds? And when I was doing my research for Creeping Garden, I wrote a book based on the Creeping Garden afterwards with the extra periphery info about slime molds. I realised Spinal Tap was made shortly after a really big National Geographic feature on slime molds, which was like, because slime molds don't often reach into public consciousness.
I've literally never heard of a slime mold before. And like, I've studied like fungus and like also like funguses that affect people and like skin fungus and stuff like that. I find that really interesting.
athlete's foot and
Like all those different things that like people can like live with a fungus their entire life and like it's in their body. And like, for example, Candida albicans, which is oral thrush or like a yeast infection, is like technically a fungus. And so I find it very fascinating that like a person can become infected, and like oral thrush is very difficult to get rid of because then it's in like your digestive system and all this stuff, and then you live with it.
I think if we had this magic power, we could see fungus, we would see them everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, literally any tree or any plant or whatever, there'll be stuff growing on it. I mean, they are literally everywhere. No one really knows that much about them. So I think that's what's really fascinating for me about this sort of hidden world, really. That we just and not an understood world.
That's the thing. Also, like, when now that you're saying that it's like understudied, like there are people probably studying it right now, trying to bring like awareness to like the whole mushroom ecology thing of like how also like they affect us living, and how like, because we need them. I'm guessing like we need fungus to be
Definitely,
around.
the world wouldn't. I mean, we'd be knee deep in organic litter anyway, because it basically breaks it all down.
Yeah, it's like exactly how sharks are for the ocean. People are always like afraid of sharks, but no, like you need the shark as the apex predator, because if you get rid of them, then all of a sudden everything goes out of whack. And it's like you just think about like, oh, a fungus, and fungus has like a bad rap. It's it's kind of like, ew, it's a fungus. Ew,
Yeah,
it's gross.
you either think they're poisonous, they're going to send
hurt
you
me.
flying off on some massive trip, or
Yeah.
they basically cause your foot to rot. But one of the really interesting things about Matango is this idea that these fungus have mutated because of the radiation.
Oh, yeah.
And this wasn't something that when I've looked into research, one of the things I wanted to do after The Creeping Garden was make a film. I paired up with a Ukrainian director, and we were going to make a documentary about the ecosystem around Chernobyl and how that got infected by the radiation. And there's been a lot of research done on how there are specific strains of fungi that have mutated and changed
they really have.
in Chernobyl. And this is like, we've only discovered this 30 years after Matango was made.
Well, I think also Japan has like that simmering fear of the radiation. I mean, we see it in other material. And then also the other thing that I always think about radiation is SpongeBob SquarePants, because the whole thing of Bikini Bottom is Bikini Atoll, where they did the thing, and like the whole theory is that they are all like beings that have been radiated.
Which is, of course, where Godzilla emerged from.
Exactly.
So we come full circle. Yeah.
How do we do that? How do we come full circle to Godzilla? Do you watch other like mushroom movies, or is it just Matango? There's not that many, I'm guessing.
There's not a lot around, is there?
There's probably
really?
psychedelic movies, but not like mutating.
What was the Ben
fungus.
Wheatley one? In the Earth? The one came out a couple of years ago, UK, Ben Wheatley. I mean, he did Field in England as well, which features a bit of psychedelic mushroom
eating.
Yeah,
That's
in the Earth.
fascinating.
Yeah.
In the Earth. I wonder why there aren't more mushroom movies. Now I'm thinking about it, because it's like when you think about a fungus, that's like immediately why I went to the Stuff, the Blob, etc., because you don't really know what a fungus is. Like I could imagine those things could just be like a big mass coming towards me.
There was a horror movie called Shrooms, wasn't there? But I've never seen it.
Is it about a bunch of kids that take shrooms?
Take shrooms and go psychotic, yeah.
God, have you seen the comic book Black Hole? I don't know why I went here. It's a Charles Burns comic, and it's basically that these kids get like these physical deformities, but it's a sexually transmitted disease, and so you can see everyone's STD, and it makes me think about it. Like that would be kind of a cool like mushroom thing. Like people get infected, and you can kind of see the mushrooms on them. God, I would feel so much anxiety if that happened to me.
And I think there was like one of the films I saw very early on when I was like really getting into Japanese films was a director called Sogo Ishii, where he's changed his name now to Gakuryu Ishii. Oh, wow. But he was like a real, visual stylist. In the mid-90s, he made a film called August in the Water, in which a meteor strike hits a small town, causing everyone's internal organs, all the water in them, to turn to stone.
Ew.
And in the meantime, this like around the crater of the meteor strike, there's all these like psychedelic mushrooms start sprouting up. And with the weirdest film ever, it's in some sort of rights limbo now, so no one has ever been able to release it. I was lucky to see it when it got a theatrical release.
It's so funny to me, though. Also, all these mushrooms are kind of like beings from outer space, because we don't really understand them. We don't look like them. They're coming from other places.
Well, we are closer to mushrooms than we are to plants, because they externally digest, so all their mycelium goes through the earth and exudes sort of enzymes which dissolve the litter. So we have an internalized digestive system. They are basically a digestive system distributed throughout whatever substrate.
So I'm a mushroom.
You're closely related to one. You share
to
very
a
close mushroom DNA.
Well, I don't know how I feel about that now. Now that I'm talking about eating mushrooms, I'm a mushroom.
You need to embrace it.
I might just need to be. I'm a mushroom. I'm a new kind of mushroom. That's completely fascinating. I am just, wow. I just can't believe that. That's all the time that we have for today. But Jasper, is there any final thought that you want to share with the audience?
I think just get to know your mushrooms, really. That's.
I also like that you actually go and like look for them, but you don't forage. Like you just go and like you search and you photograph and you take samples, but you're not eating them necessarily.
I just think that the world is far more complex and interesting when you are looking in that level of depth than we ever appreciate.
I find this completely fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on to the show. If you'd like to keep up with Jasper, you can do so on his website, jaspersharp.squarespace.com. I'm Gala Avery, and this has been The Gala Show.
The Gala Show is brought to you by Avery.com. This episode was executive produced by Roger Avery and produced by Gala Avery. Music composed by Andy Milburn. Additional sound mixing by Eric Clapp. As always, I'm your host, Gala Avery. Copyright 2024, All rights reserved. Despite me sharing the same last name with this charity, I don't have any affiliation with it, besides the fact the issue is very near and dear to my heart. Did you know that in the United States, 2.7 million children currently have a parent in prison, and it's estimated that 10 million children have experienced parental incarceration at some point in their lives? I was one of these kids, and as an adult, I am really grateful to be able to give back to Project Avery. Their mission is to build leadership from within by supporting community through programs such as mentoring and outdoor education, and also to remove the stigma surrounding having a parent that's incarcerated. You don't have to feel alone. If you know a kid who could use these resources or would like to donate money or time to the charity, please go to Project Avery, that's AVARY.org, to check out what this amazing charity is all about. Again, that's projectavery.org. Thank you guys, from the bottom of my heart.
Hey moms, looking for some lighthearted guidance on this crazy journey we call parenting?
Join me, Sabrina Kohlberg,
And me, Andy Mitchell, for Pop Culture Moms,
where each week we talk about what we're watching
and examine our favorite pop culture moms up close to try to pick up some parenting hacks along the way.
Come laugh, learn, and grow with us as we look for the best tips.
And maybe a few what not to do's from our favorite fictional moms.
From Good Morning America and ABC Audio.
Pop Culture Moms. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.